Have you ever thought to yourself, I'd really like to know how to install a windshield? Well, think no more. We got you covered. We're going to take one out, reinstall it the right way in just a moment. I'm Tim Johnson. You're watching Shop Tool Reviews. We've had a mid-90s Jeep Wrangler sitting around the shop now for, I'd say, a few weeks. We've just been trying to button some things up on it and help someone out. Now, one of the problems was it leaked terribly around the windshield. And these older Jeeps had rubber gaskets they held these windshields in. This one, once they went to the Wrangler style, they started gluing these windshields in like most other passenger cars. So it's not as easy as just pushing one out and taking a new gasket and then putting a rope around it and pulling it back in. It actually has to be cut out and re-glued back in. Now, this same routine will really work on most cars with glued in windshields, back glasses, and so forth. So you can translate this into other vehicles, not just on a Jeep. Now, you do have to take some care, especially if you're trying to remove the window without breaking it. Like in our case, this was pretty much a brand new windshield. So we wanted to cut it out, reuse it, and reinstall it. So we were trying to take extra precaution in keeping it in one piece without cracking it. Also, you're going to need a couple of tools. Number one, you're going to have to cut it out with something. Piano wire works good, but like this is equalizer. They make a lot of glass tools, and so they make a specific wire. It's like a square wire that cuts really good. A couple of dowels. They make handles as well that you can use, but I just cut a couple of dowels out of some composite and use those. And then you'll need urethane. You definitely need some urethane. You can't skimp on this. You need something that's specific for windshields or specific for the auto industry. Now, this is something I've been doing for decades. In fact, most of my life, since the family actually bought into a glass business years ago when I was growing up. So obviously, you get molded right into the glass business. And the majority of that was doing auto glass as well as heavy equipment, which a lot of the heavy equipment is installed the same way. Used to be in rubber gaskets. Now most of them are all glued in. So same processing, cutting them out and resetting them. So I've got quite a few decades of experience. Now, I haven't done it in about, I don't know, 15 or 20 years as far as regularly, but I still have to do things from time to time, whether it be projects here or, you know, helping my dad out still in the business. So let me give you a precaution here. This is the worst video I have ever put out. In fact, in the last minute was when I determined that, hey, I'm gonna actually film this. So I literally grabbed the GoPro. We had fans going. It was hot in here. And so you hear tons of wind noise. It's just a terrible production. So if you'll forgive me for that, then I'll go ahead and run it, because I really don't even want to release this, but I'm going to, because I think there's some good content in it. But again, the camera quality and the sound quality is just absolutely pathetic. So you got to forgive me for that. We're going to give you some great content and show you how to do this, and we'll come back and wrap it up. So what we're going to attempt to do is reset this windshield. So this is not in rubber. A lot of the old Jeeps were mounted in rubber, but this is actually urethaned in. You see the black band around here. It's glued in. Now, this was a very poor job. It's leaking like crazy, even though this is pretty much a new windshield. I think it's also been bondoed here along the bottom as well. But if we'll take a look inside in here, we'll see the urethane is just kind of oozed up on the top. They probably put a round bead on it and probably put it pretty thin as well, because when we look up here in the top, we can see gaps. Hopefully this will show through here. See where that light's shining through right there? That's a gap in the urethane, and there's more down here. So there's another gap there. So there's several gaps here in the urethane just from a really bad install. So we're going to try to show you how we remove this safely without breaking it, hopefully, and then reset it. So some of the things you're going to need is you're going to need a wire to cut with, and I'll show you that here in a moment. And then you're going to need some urethane. We're using the Dow Industries Beta Seal. PPG makes one. There's a couple of different urethane companies, but make sure you get a urethane that's made for setting windshields, setting glass, and most of the time you're going to need a primer as well. The primer goes with the urethane. Make sure you get a good bond. Another thing I'd highly recommend is a powered caulking gun, because this urethane is thick, doesn't like to come out with an easy squeeze at all. So having a battery powered gun is definitely going to help you there. Just piano wire will work, but you know, here's an example of some equalizer wire that's made again specifically for cutting glass out, cutting urethane embedded or urethane glued glass in. This works really well. And you can use just 2 handles on it. They also make specific tools to do this as well, but just a couple of wooden dowels will work absolutely fine for you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start our wire. The good thing is we got a little gap in the urethane here where we can stick this up through. And then I'm just going to take a pair of bent needle nose here and pull those out. Again, be as careful as you can here. If your windshield's already broke, you're not worried about it. This should be a pretty easy process for you. So all we've done here is taken us this is a composite dowel, if you will, drilled a hole through it. And so now we've got basically 2 handles on either side, and we're just going to easily do a sawing action. And even if you may be able to do it without doing a sawing action, just by keeping some tension and doing an easy pull. Look, see, that tells you how bad this windshield was in. It just jumped quite a ways there. And again, you want to try to stay out of the paint, try to stay out of the finish, and do an easy, smooth cut here. So in a situation like here where you've got a big goop of urethane, what you want to do is kind of create a channel for your wire to go. So I can take a razor blade and just kind of cut right along that windshield, and that's going to kind of give that wire a place to go without digging into the windshield itself. So this is where we're really being careful, trying to get this windshield out in one piece or without cracking it. Now, otherwise, this would probably be a 5-minute process to cut this flat windshield out of a Jeep. But again, it was pretty much a brand new windshield. Really want to try to save it for the person we're doing this for. So we're being really careful. And since the urethane was so thin, it'd be really easy to break this if you just pulled too hard in a certain area. So that's why it took us probably 15 minutes to get this cut out. Okay, so what I'm doing here is we've got everything cut around here. And by the way, when you're doing this, you can do a sawing action, but just understand it will build heat quick in the wire, can create the wire, make the wire break, as well as it can burn things like the dash, any plastic, something like that, so, and ruin paint. So be careful when you are sawing, doing the sawing action, it will create heat. So if you can just do a smooth pull, that's best. Also in these corners, I don't want, again, I'm trying to keep this windshield from breaking, so I don't want that wire cutting into my windshield, which it will do. So I'm taking a plastic paddle here, and I'm getting that wire beneath that glass. So that's what you see when you see me using this paddle, is I'm getting that wire beneath the glass so that I'm cutting the urethane and not in this glass. As I mentioned earlier, try to keep that wire from getting in the finish as well as on any plastic, because it will cut and burn it. Also, try to hold it close to the glass and close to the frame where you're pulling it directly horizontally with the glass. So now we can actually see how bad this windshield was installed. So you can see the urethane here, and number one, there's a problem there too. I'll show you that in just a moment as well. You can tell by the glossiness of that urethane, but I'll point something else out to you in just a moment. But you can see the gaps in the urethane. There was no glue right there, no urethane there, no urethane there. All around this thing, I'm surprised it wasn't leaking more. Look, no urethane there. Total gap right there, right there. So all around this thing, just amazing that it wasn't pouring more water. Yeah, so this, just a horrible install. I don't know if the paint and body shop did this, that actually painted this, but really terrible job. and they probably put a round bead on there, and we'll cover that in a moment as well. But let me show you why that urethane is shiny like that. Okay, so here's the windshield. I don't know if the camera's gonna show this, but if you can see the urethane right here, this is dull. This is really dull right here. So when you cut in the urethane, you'll see that dull. But when it's just been resting up against glass and hasn't stuck, like right there, you see the glass is shiny and the urethane shiny. It's really smooth. So this windshield was never really adhered to that urethane. So it really was not glued whatsoever. So we're gonna take this, gonna take a brand new razor blade and clean all that urethane off, and then we'll clean it with a glass cleaner with no silicone in the glass cleaner. You want to make sure you're using a glass cleaner with no silicone in it, because you need the glue to stick to this. The idea here would be to leave about an 1/8 inch of urethane on the bed. However, there's just so much that's not here. We may have to trim most of it off. But again, you want to trim this back because we've got to put a new bed down, and then we'll be putting primer on this windshield as well, or on the body as well. So we're doing a couple of things here. Number one, we're trimming away any urethane that was kind of rolled over the edge, if you will, kind of gooped out, if you will, from the previous installation. The other thing we're doing is actually cutting the thickness of the bed. In other words, we wanted to leave about an 8-inch thick bed of urethane on there. Now, in this case, there were a lot of places where there was no urethane, period. So obviously, we'll just want to clean that up. But again, we're wanting to make the bed of that urethane, or that existing urethane that's on there, make it only about an 1/8 inch thick, so that we'll have a place to put our new urethane, as well as be able to still compress that windshield down where it needs to go, and also be able to prep the surface here. And now I'm taking a piece of sandpaper and actually scuffing up the areas where there was a paint finish or where there was no urethane, so that then we can put some primer on it and eventually put the urethane on it to be able to stick the glass. So anywhere we had shiny metal or shiny paint, I went ahead and just hit that with a little bit of 220, 400, something like that, just to scuff that up. Even a Scotch-Brite pad, a nice coarse Scotch-Brite pad to scuff that up so that your primer will adhere to it, and then your urethane. And then I cleaned it just with some water, just dampened it and cleaned up that dirt. That's really the best thing to clean anything with, is just as much pure water as you can, and then let it dry good. And we'll come back and we'll put a bed of primer down, and then lay the urethane in and put that windshield in. And here's glass cleaner specifically for use with the urethane, and we'll go ahead and use this to clean it off with the razor blade, and then come back and clean it. Okay, so now we want to make sure we're good and clean. So brand new paper towel, and you want this nice and clean and nice and dry. And mainly the area that's going to get the urethane bed, but you might as well go ahead and clean the whole glass on the inside, and then you don't have to do that when you're done. So here's the primer that comes with this one, and it's basically a glass tube inside of here. So we break this, and then we dab until basically that bleeds out the ends here. There we go. And so now what we want to do, we want to make a nice even line around here. The nice thing is we've got a black band on there already, so we're just trying to put a band on the windshield for that urethane to stick. Make sure that your primer is coming out. If you don't have that black band, if you want to run a piece of tape, you can do that. Here I'm trying to film and I already ran out of the lines. And be careful, because like in this situation, there's not a rubber seal that goes around the outside of the glass, so therefore you see down in this groove. But I definitely, wherever I've got primer or Bondo showing, I want to cover with primer. Now here's another tip. So when you get your urethane, you may get pre-cut tips like this. They have that V-groove in it. That's important. You may want to just cut that like a caulking tube and make a round hole, but let me tell you why you don't want to do that. So if you got a round hole, when you push that glass down into that body, that round hole becomes an oval. Okay? That's kind of what was done on there already. However, if we put a triangle of bead on there, so if this is the body and we put a triangle bead on there, and then we flatten it out, what we get is a nice rectangle that glass sits on. So that's why we want to make that triangle there, because that bead is going to become more like a rectangle than just this ovalness that what we saw how that glass was not adhered very well at all. So here's another tip for you. If you didn't get rubber stops with whatever kit you bought or what have you, I just took a piece of urethane with a good, at least a 1/8 inch thickness, even a 1/4 or 3/8 would be good too, depending on what windshield you're putting in. But anyway, so I just cut off a couple of pieces. These are going to be my stops where the windshield actually rests on. That'll enable us to sit it off the frame. Whenever I'm installing a windshield back glass, anything that's glued in, really any type of glass installation, goes along with about anything else. I take the moment right before I'm doing it to go ahead and clean up, get ready to kind of do the final product, if you will. So just do some general cleanup, and now I'm using the caulking gun to put the urethane on. Now you'll notice I've pretty much got that caulking gun pointed straight at the frame. That allows that V-shaped tip to lay down that triangle bed or triangle bead of urethane. Now I'm taking a plastic paddle and I'm kind of blending each one of those joints where two of the beads like ran together where I stopped and started. And now we're going to set the glass. We're going to use those couple of pieces of urethane that we cut to actually sit the windshield on. And then we're careful to make sure we're centered up on each side, as well as height from the top and the bottom, because in this situation we want a nice even space all the way around. Once you're confident that you got the glass centered, then you want to go ahead and press it down a little bit, but don't do this too much, but you want to make sure that you're pressing it down into the bed of the urethane. And then we're going to clean it up. Again, be careful not to get in any urethane and smear it around. We doubled up the stops and let it sit a little bit higher to get it kind of even. So it was sitting a little low. Now it's sitting about right. Nice even gap all the way around. You can see in here a lot better bead, nice flat bead there now, not just some round ooze coming out. So that triangle bead flattened out nicely like it's supposed to. Okay, it's really not rocket science. Pretty much you cut it out, you reinstall it. Be careful. Glass does not like anything hard against it. You can't set glass on concrete. Shouldn't set glass on steel. Always put some cardboard underneath it, or a towel or something like that. So never set the edge of that glass on anything sharp, anything hard, because it will crack it very easily. Also, this wire will cut into that glass as well, and once it starts to crack, that crack will run. Not if, it will run. It just may not be today or may not be tomorrow, but that crack will run. So always take precaution in where you're setting it and how you're setting it. Also, we had it laid flat on this table because it was a flat piece of glass. That is the most unstable a piece of glass is laying horizontal. You really, anytime you can, want to lay that up where it's actually sitting vertical, and then it's much more stable than when it's laying flat. Now, you will have to set it on some sawhorses or something like that to clean it. But again, be careful with it. Don't apply a lot of pressure in the center or on the ends because all that leverage can create a crack as well. Now, these urethane tubes will typically cost you somewhere around 20 bucks a piece. You may be able to get them cheaper, but again, don't skimp on that. Make sure you're getting a good quality urethane and make sure you're using a primer, or otherwise you're going to see, like we cut out, of urethane not sticking to the glass, not sticking to the paint finish. If you have any questions on this process or any questions in general, feel free to leave them in the comments. And if you don't mind, hit that like and subscribe button if you like this video. If you didn't like it, give us a thumbs down, but let us know in the comments why. Have a great day and keep smiling.